Recording in progress.
Just gonna wait.
Not interesting as in a West Coast interesting, but interesting.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we're good. Should be. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on such a beautiful evening. But this is pretty exciting. This is our last CAC meeting, our last scheduled CAC meeting. And with that, I just want to say a big thanks to everyone who has been on this journey with us for the past 2 years, relooking at this plan and providing, wonderful guidance on how we plan Sherwood West in the future. I want to thank all of the CAC members and also the community members that have, provided information to us over the past 2 years as well. So, yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to amplify that because this has been a journey. I think you used that word, and I appreciate every single one of you for all the hard work and the extra meetings. I do believe this was the first concept planning effort after HB 2001 passed, which threw a big wrench into the works. So we kind of plowed through a lot of new ground on that, and you guys were great. Also, the community's been great too with all the feedback and everything else. So. Is it?
It's on.
How about now? Anyways, I just for the benefit of everybody out there, this has been a journey. It's been a lot of hard work where we paved new ground because, and I'm saying it again for the people out there, that because of HB 2001, which was passed in 2019, which totally changed how we think about planning, we had to really rethink how we do concept planning. And I don't think anyone around us has thought about that yet. So we paved a lot of new ground, and I appreciate all the hard work of everyone on this committee and our community for supporting our efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. So we had a lovely welcome. Meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the meeting minutes from the last CAC? Perfect. Oh.
I'm just going to give it to Erica.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah, via email. Great. Okay, thank you. And do we have any public comment tonight? We do. We have a couple people signed up for public comments this evening. We have two community members who are online tonight, so I'm just going to go back and have them switch the screen, so hopefully we can see their faces. And give me 1 minute. Before we do that, yes. I forgot to do introductions. Sorry about that. Oh, it should have been part of the welcome. So I'll start. I'm Kate Rogers. I'm a senior planner with MIG, and I've been the lead planner on this project ever since Joe Dills retired a couple months ago. And let's see, start this way.
Tim Rosner, been on the committee. I'm also the mayor of Sherwood.
Jean Simpson, Planning Commission.
Sherwood resident. Brian Dorsey, Sherwood resident and Police Advisory Board member.
Emily Campbell, Sherwood resident.
Michael Black, Sherwood resident.
Kennedy Hawkins, Sherwood resident.
Rodney Lister, Sherwood residents, part of the Parks Board.
Jim Rose, Sherwood resident and with the Sherwood School District.
And Erica Palmer, planning manager for the city of Sherwood. And also on Zoom, we have Darcy Rudzinski, also from MIG, and she is overseeing the project as a project manager. All right. All right. So moving on to public comments. I know that we have 2 people online this evening. So we're going to start with John Rankin. And John, You have 3 minutes for testimony. And just to let you know, I do have a timer.
Okay, great. Thanks, Erica. I'm John Rankin. I'm a land use attorney and consultant. Been in the Sherwood area and working around the Sherwood area, and actually lived inside the city for a couple of years, and then lived in the community of surrounding the city up on Baker Road for another 18 or 20 years. So I've been involved in a lot of processes here, and I'm sorry to see Joe Dills go. I didn't realize he had retired, but I followed Joe around the metro area at various concept planning stuff, you know, and I've represented cities myself in various capacities. Anyway, I'm representing currently and or working with about 6 property owners in the Sherwood area, West area, representing about 160 acres. We went through the first phase of the concept planning process, and I'm very impressed with the relook process that you've gone through here recently. Looks like you've got all the ducks in line and everything looks very good. And I want to compliment all of you, the staff, the city council, Tim, your efforts, and everybody who's helped you, the consultants. You know, you have a great team of consultants, and of course the community action team and committee and the technical advisory committee too. Those are very important players here. Anyway, I'll just have a few comments on the record, and that is, you know, I've talked with staff members in the past, and one of the things that I have found most important with these planning concept planning processes is that once you determine, particularly in recent years, this has become painfully clear. In recent years, any metro expansion usually includes a substantial amount of land. And I would encourage you to move forward trying to recommend, at least recommend to Planning Commission and City Council, and have the City Council go forward with a plan to to expand the urban growth boundary for all of the property that's there, or a substantial portion thereof. I have seen in my experience portions of properties come in, conceptually planned back in the old days, and you don't end up with the finished product that I think you really have laid down so nicely here. That happened with the 90 acres, Area 59 here in Sherwood. I was involved in that, where the Ridges Elementary School and the middle school were built. And actually, I sold property on behalf of one of my clients to a developer who moved a neighborhood commercial designation off the property. So my recommendation is, for the benefit of coordinating infrastructure, protecting the natural resource environment, getting the kind of finished product on the ground that you're looking for here, and you've done such a profound job achieving. Make sure that you reach for the star on it and get as much of the property in, if not all of the property in, that you can. The developers will. Let me just make one. Okay. One quick comment. I do have a letter of intent signed by a developer on a piece of substantial piece of employment land already. So things are happening already as you're moving forward. So thank you very much. Appreciate the time and attention. Take care and go forward.
Next up, we have Cindy Bells.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, Cindy, please go ahead. And you have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Hello, I'm Cindy Bells, a Sherwood resident, and my comments are regarding roads. It might be helpful to take a look at a map while I'm speaking. A lot of emphasis has been placed on north-south travel through Sherwood West. Why is moving people efficiently from the west to the east in order to reach Highway 99W not being addressed? Most residents in Sherwood West travel to destinations outside of Sherwood West, and getting them to Highway 99, where they can travel north-south, seems like a far better approach. My current straight shot from Western Edie Road to Highway 99 doesn't put me on Elbert Road at all. Under the proposed realignment, in order to access Highway 99, Edie Road drivers coming from the west would have to zigzag through 2 roundabouts and remain in the Elbert Road area much longer than before. Also, I fear coming from the western portion of Edie Road, or I fear drivers coming from the western portion of Edie Road will never get a break to enter the roundabouts, whereas now we have a traffic signal that allows us an opportunity to cross Elbert in order to continue our path along Edie Road to access Highway 99. Also, if you could get the commuters traveling from the north on Roy Rogers Road to Highway 99 more efficiently, I doubt Elbert Road would have the problem it does now. Currently, drivers have to pass through a meandering path and experience significant delays from ongoing road construction before they reach the intersection of Roy Rogers and Highway 99. Because of this, they choose to take Elbert Road instead. There will probably be a great improvement once the construction is finished, and the temptation for commuters to use Elbert Road will ease. Pushing freight traffic up the hill to a conceptual north-south road is a bad idea and environmentally irresponsible because it forces large trucks to burn more diesel and expel more exhaust as they ascend the steep hills. Then they would have to go right back down the hill, since there's no reason for them to be up there, and travel through the same roundabouts you are proposing, which they may or may not even be able to negotiate given the turn radius. Also, if trucks were rerouted up the hill, for them to get to Highway 99 from Edie Road, they would have to drive through the existing school crossing at Ridges Elementary. What's not clear is why you would want to route truck traffic through Sherwood West. If a delivery needs to be made to the high school, then it makes sense for a truck to get right back on Highway 99W when they're done. If a delivery is made to or from the Northern Employment District, then it would be easiest for a truck to jump back on Highway 99 to continue. Redirecting trucks and other traffic onto Edie Road is also going to make the intersection at 99W a nightmare. Getting trucks to stay on Highway 99W, which is a state-designated freight corridor, is a much better idea for Sherwood West and its residents, including school children. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And then we have 2 folks in the audience tonight that have signed up for public testimony. We're going to start with Mark Farrar. Sure.
Is that all right? Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm Mark Farrar. I'm a resident of just west of Sherwood West for about a dozen years. I happen to have a son who's a classmate of your daughter's at the high school, and but that's not the reason I'm here tonight. I happen to work for a company called Metropolitan Land Group, and we are a landowner in Sherwood West. And I just wanted to raise a couple quick issues, recognizing that this is the last meeting potentially of this group. We think there's a couple really minor technical tweaks that could be made to the document that have really no material impact on it, but moving forward, but they're really important to us as landowners in that area. Metropolitan Land Group is a longtime business owner in Sherwood, and we're providing housing in Sherwood today, and we want to continue to do that as Sherwood West develops. We appreciate all the months and months of work that the Citizen Committee has done, that the staff has done, the consultants have done. We've been following along, and we really think it's a great product that you have here in front of you, and we're gratified to see that the committee throughout the process has taken the input of residents in Sherwood West, the future area, into account. For example, the Eastview residents you've had to balance their interests against the Elbert Road neighborhood and try to figure out how to balance that. Also, the Parks area that's north of Edie Road that was identified just north of the Ridges got moved, and that was as a result of input of a landowner in that area. So we appreciate the responsiveness that you have. The first thing that we're particularly focused on is the hospitality and tourism designation in the far southern strip of the area. What we're requesting is that rather than that be kind of a designation for that land, that potentially the committee consider it designated as an overlay, so that there's an underlying zone, not zoning, because we know we're not at a zoning issue right now, rather than being identified just as that there's some underlying land use that potentially could exist there, but an overlay is what we call it, so that tourism and hospitality is possible going forward, rather than designating it as that, because that's a highly specialized land use, and locking that designation into the plan for that strip of area for the plan going forward could be a challenge. That land may never develop. The second one is just the fact that the natural resource areas and wetlands, as you go through the different maps, and I was going through again the concept plan tonight, maps on page 62, 28, 59, 50, and 41 all have a lot of natural resources identified, and we think it would be helpful for the document to much more strongly note that the natural resource areas or parks are just conceptual. That once there's ground truth done, once there's survey work done through the development process, that those areas may enlarge or they may shrink. Because we all know that once a map is published, and particularly 10 or 14 maps are published in a document like this, someone in the community could get a hold of that, not get a hold of it, thank you, and really get focused on it. So we think some additional language to heavily caveat that these are conceptual and they'll get ground truth would be beneficial to the whole process. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, Joy. One more over here, Joy.
And then we have one more community member who signed up for community comment this evening. Brian, you want to?
Sure.
That way you have the microphone.
Well, members of the committee, thank you for the time to speak, and thank you during this process also for listening to the input that I and other members of our neighborhood group have had. I feel like it did make a difference in that there was acknowledgement of much of what we were saying. Today, I'm really just wanting to focus on moving forward, and also the one item that I'd like to specifically comment about is Elwert Road. I do want to say that I think that the realignment that is proposed is really not productive. It's going to be a negative impact for all of us who live on Edie Road west of Elwert. But more, I would like to look towards the future, because I do appreciate the caveats that you had in the report that reference the need for further technical studies and practical studies to see what's even feasible. And considering that, I know there will probably be planning efforts for what the future of Elwert Road is. And I just would like to stress a few things with that. In the future planning efforts, I would encourage you to involve all current residents who live on Edie Road. And not just those residents who are within the urban reserve, but there are residents outside up Edie Road and some of the roads that feed off of Edie Road who have businesses and just residents. And please include them also, because I think their input is important. Also, recognize that improving Edie Road's capacity to serve as a regional connector will benefit Sherwood as a whole. When Edie Road can accommodate a high volume of regional traffic, but do it in a way that is safe and does not have a negative impact on the surrounding neighborhoods, that's going to be a benefit for Highway 99 and all of the neighborhoods that have to feed onto Highway 99 and gain access to Highway 99. It's going to improve their ability to navigate future roads too. Just imagine if Elwert became so slowed down that everyone continued down Highway 99 and went up Roy Rogers Road, where they could more efficiently pass through Elwert and then head on to Hillsborough or Beaverton or wherever they're headed. Okay. So I just want to stress that it can be both a high-volume regional connector and a safe road that does not negatively impact neighborhoods. And I really encourage the city to work with Washington County to improve Elwood Road's role as a regional connector. Thank you.
So that was everyone who has signed up for comment this evening.
Okay, great. So tonight, the focus of our this meeting tonight is just to talk about the draft concept plan that you all have in front of you, and hopefully we gave it to you, the CAC, enough time in advance that you were able to read at least some of it, if not all of it. We did our best to make it a concise summary of all of the work that was done to date, but we still wanted to make sure we captured the important discussions and conversations that this group had, and city staff and the technical advisory committee had, and community as well. And so it is difficult to do that in a small number of pages. So I'm just going to give a super brief overview of the draft concept plan, and then we'll open it up to discussion and comments. So these are the sections of the plan. We have a super brief summary in the executive summary, introduction and sort of background, why we're taking another look at the preliminary concept plan that was done a few years ago, an overview of the process and the engagement process and how that really kind of shaped the outcomes and the product, and this group being kind of the sort of the through line and the backbone of that process. Touching back to the vision and the goals, and those again really shaped the concept plan. Direction, an overview of the existing conditions, land use, transportation, natural resources, parks, things like that. How we got to the land use alternatives and trying to summarize that. I know that process was somewhat lengthy with this group, and it kind of took us several sessions to kind of get to some agreement on what those alternatives should be and what the final preferred alternative was. But I think we came to a good conclusion at the end. And then the recommendations for the concept plan itself. So, what the recommended land uses are, the map, and the approach to housing, the approach to employment, a real focus on mixed employment as kind of a key use, especially in the northern portion of Sherwood West, providing more living wage jobs for the community. The transportation plan, talking about kind of the conceptual framework of roads that is recommended for Sherwood West, but acknowledging that these are really conceptual, and a lot of work will need to be done to figure out what the alignments will be. We have some choices to make between different alternatives, in particular Elwood and Edie Road, and whether that the alignment is, or the realignment of that intersection is recommended by this group and by the city, but it's those decisions are not final until some additional study and evaluation takes place. The green space network, of course, the location of the parks, those are also really conceptual, and the city doesn't own those properties where we've identified locations for parks, so that will also take additional work in partnership with property owners and with the Parks Department, and that's a longer term process. And then utilities, of course, that's really fundamental to allowing development to happen in the future in Sherwood West, making sure we have the roads and we have the sewer and the water infrastructure in place. And then implementation. So those are the next steps that are recommended for the city to take after this concept plan is hopefully accepted by City Council. And I do want to talk about some of those implementation pieces next, just because some of those are kind of newer content. Some of these we've talked about, but some of it is somewhat newer, and we haven't discussed it as much in this group. So before I get to that, I'm just going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions on kind of the concept plan overall, and we'll hold for discussion at the end as well. But
yeah, and if I could just add something, because I've gotten this question a lot, because there's rumors out there that as soon as this plan is approved, that there's going to be backhoes and dump trucks over there, and everything's going to start. And I just wanted to write, this is a plan, a concept plan. There's a lot of other steps to go, but even then, a property owner would have to decide they want to sell their property to a developer for something to actually happen out there. The only thing we're doing is laying a framework, but in no way, the city has no intention of a condemnation process or anything like that. A property owner would have to say, I'm ready, I want to sell my property, and I have a buyer and they want to build. It would take that before anything happens out there, after we get all the planning done. So just for anyone listening, I've fielded that question more times than I can remember. So I just wanted to just put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and so even well before we gets to that stage, the city would need to request that the urban growth boundary be expanded to include Sherwood West, and that is something that can happen as soon as next year. It can make that request to Metro, who ultimately will then kind of forward that request on to the state of Oregon that will make that decision.
On that topic, I think it would be helpful for the community to understand that that is a prescribed year and that there are certain parameters around when the next opportunity to request that.
Yes.
I'm not sure members of the community that I've talked to understand that, but this is kind of
yes.
You can't just go anytime and ask
right.
So the state requires every 6 years that we go through this process. Metro has a mid-cycle. That's it. So basically, it's every 3 years. But it's also important to note we can do an industrial ask or a public institutional ask anytime. We don't necessarily have to wait for those. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Awesome.
But yes, I think 2024 is sort of the official
Legislative ask.
Yes.
The 6-year cycle.
Yeah. Yes, and then so the next piece in implementation is, or at least the next piece that's in the report. These are not necessarily in sort of time order, but infrastructure funding strategy. So this was something that we talked about at the last CAC meeting. We have a preliminary infrastructure funding strategy that you all heard from our consultants with Leland Consulting Group. And they kind of looked at some of the key infrastructure pieces, catalyst projects that will be needed to kind of unlock future development opportunities in Sherwood West, including in the future employment areas in the northern portion of the study area, and then also kind of the areas surrounding the high school to the north and south of the high school, which are sort of the areas around the high school are sort of the most likely to develop sooner rather than later, just because there is that existing infrastructure nearby. So there's that access there. And then the employment area to the north is just, it's a really important part of Sherwood West that the city is interested in enabling to be developed, just because of the opportunity to create jobs in that area, add to the tax base and all those things, which were really kind of fundamental to this relook process for Sherwood West. So there were some cost estimates that were done for that, really preliminary cost estimates, and then looking at where the funding gaps are and what tools the city might have at its disposal to kind of fill those funding gaps. And through that process, a supplemental system development charge rose to the top as probably the most likely funding tool, in addition to seeking state or regional funds, maybe federal funds for transportation projects. And again, these are preliminary ideas. I think once the city gets into more detailed, comprehensive planning and zoning and figures out what the actual land uses will be and what that transportation network will look like, and those things are all adopted, then it can go into more detailed infrastructure funding strategies and adopt new tools. If the city's going to adopt a supplemental SDC for Sherwood West, those would all take place at that time. Future zoning and regulations. So this was, of course, a big focus of this project, what the land uses might be, and the concept plan presents ideas and recommendations for what land uses should be in Sherwood West, but those are not final. And the city, as a next step after the urban growth boundary is expanded to include Sherwood West, we'll be taking another look at this area, taking the recommendations from the concept plan, and again, talking to the community about what they want to see happen in this area, and actually figuring out what those land use designations and zoning designations should be. And as part of that, we have talked about some customized, sort of tailored residential zoning designations to acknowledge that middle housing is kind of the new sort of regulatory reality in Oregon, and wanting to embrace the forms of middle housing that the community really likes and wants to incorporate into Sherwood West. So there are two residential, kind of custom residential zones that are recommended. One is a cottage cluster zone that would only allow cottage clusters, which are groupings of small footprint homes that share some common open space and can share parking and things like that. And so this zone would only allow that form of housing as kind of an alternative to more typical sort of larger lot single family zoning. And then the other custom zone is a middle housing zone that would include cottage clusters, but also duplexes and townhomes, which are kind of the two other forms of middle housing that folks in Sherwood seem to favor, and folks as part of the CAC seemed to favor, and want to make sure that those forms of middle housing are built, because they provide a lot of more housing choices, and they're not necessarily what developers that are used to building single family housing are, kind of will default to. And so if certain areas aren't designated for middle housing, it could be that, in single family areas, there will be the opportunity to also build middle housing, but because the market for single family housing is still so strong, there's no guarantee that will actually come to fruition. So, and in addition, it gives the city some more flexibility to kind of tailor its development standards, its design standards, without having to necessarily meet all of the really sort of rigorous state requirements that are required by House Bill 2001. So, but as part of, undergoing this additional kind of refinement, comprehensive planning process, there will be a lot of decisions to make, and additional study will be necessary to figure out what those zones should look like, and how the standards should be designed, and what aspects you want to incorporate from existing zones, and what kind of new ideas you want to think about for Sherwood West. The hospitality zone. So there was a comment about the approach to the hospitality zone and wanting to make sure that is flexible, and maybe consider more of an overlay approach. And that is one of the options that we talk about in the concept plan, is not necessarily saying that this is going to be a hospitality-only zoning district. Could be an overlay, it could be something else. But the idea being that this is kind of that hospitality is a focus of this area. And it could be that other uses would also be permitted, or maybe not. I think some additional sort of economic study of those approaches would be really beneficial to see what the market is for those uses, and how kind of feasible it is to kind of target specific hospitality uses like hotels and restaurants and sort of wine tourism, or whether other uses should also be allowed. We also talk about master planning or village planning, which is an idea of kind of taking a step beyond just zoning and actually making more specific decisions about where, say, certain housing types will be located within a certain area, which could be sort of a subset of Sherwood West. It could be kind of a village focus area where you have kind of a commercial center and then residential neighborhoods around that. And that is a process that the city could undertake. And there are lots of great examples, say in Wilsonville with the Villebois area, and then Frog Pond West, and now Frog Pond East and South has really taken this master planning approach to kind of be more intentional about where the land uses are, where the transportation system is, where the parks are, where the trails are, and making sure those are all really integrated, and kind of partnering with developers in that process. So that is something that's a tool that the city could take advantage of if it wanted to.
Is it still a viable option
Yes, I think it is. Yes, I mean there are certain rules that the state has put into place that say even if you're doing a master plan, you still have to plan for middle housing, and that you might have to reach certain density targets with middle housing. But that's not to say that you can't do master planning. It might look a little bit different than it used to. It might have to be a little bit more flexible than it used to. Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I add on to your question? I think, just adding on to that question, where I'm concerned is you can do the whole master plan, and it's all laid out, but then a builder can come in and says, I don't want to do single-family detached on that lot. I want to do a quad or a triplex. Are we protected if we do master planning that they have to stick to the plan?
You could look individually, like lot by lot, kind of designate the certain types of housing.
It's a good question, actually.
Because the way HB 2001 is written from 2019, it says any area zoned for residential, for single-family detached, the developer can choose a different housing type, is my understanding. So that's the kind of the detail that I haven't felt like we've gotten a really good, solid answer on yet. But unless you know something new on that, there's been no lawsuits, so we don't really know how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I think you're right that you might not be able to say this area is single family only and no other housing types can be built here. I think you need to make it more flexible. But for example, Wilsonville right now they're still working on the Frog Pond East and South areas, and they are working on kind of location-based sort of incentive strategies they want to encourage kind of a mix of housing types, and actually seeing that the development market is still really strong for single family. And so what they're assuming is that if they don't plan for middle housing, then it'll end up as all like really large single family homes, and they're wanting to avoid that outcome.
And I don't want to imply I want to avoid that too. We need some middle housing desperately in Sherwood, but we also want to,
it's hard when you don't have certainty about, especially when it comes to infrastructure, planning your infrastructure, and what densities are going to be. So it's not as straightforward as saying, this is exactly how it's going to look. But especially if you have a developer partner that's really on board and wants to work with the city, I think that can be really helpful, because you can have agreements that if you take part in this plan, then you will build it the way that we have designed it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then annexation is the next step that would happen after the zoning designations and comprehensive plan designations and plans for roads and all of those things are in place. Then property owners can make a request to annex their land into the city, and that would need to happen before it can be developed. And there are some recommendations in the concept plan for new annexation policies in the comprehensive plan that would kind of ensure that properties that are brought into Sherwood West, kind of deliver especially the sort of public amenities that are laid out in the plan, so trails and parks, that the property owners agrees to provide those things that will be really essential to making Sherwood West the great community that it's really envisioned to be. Let me pause again there just to see if there's any other comments or questions about those things. Okay, transportation and infrastructure. So as we've said lots of times, a lot of work is still yet to be done on the transportation side. In Sherwood West, we have a conceptual, network of roads, and this diagram in particular is the sort of very conceptual. The north-south concept is not even necessarily a recommendation in terms of what will be built as part of sort of initial phases of build out in Sherwood West, but it's an idea that we wanted to make sure that the city continues to kind of think about and study further, and incorporate into larger sort of regional planning discussions. But for some of those other specific areas like the Elwert Road and Edie Road alignment, we included both options in the plan just to make sure that it's clear that those nothing is off the table at this point. But this group and the city is recommending the realignment approach, and we kind of lay out some of the pros and cons for both of those two options in the plan. And there are trade-offs to both, of course. The connection to the Brookman area is another item that will require some further study. There is sort of a loose recommendation to have some kind of separated grade crossing, a local crossing, so that would be north of Chapman Road and south of Kruger Road that would connect between those two areas. But again, no preferred alternative has been selected for that connection. And then again, the north-south connectivity is kind of a sort of a higher level recommendation for further study. And then public facility plans, these are things like the transportation system plan and the sewer master plan and water master plan. Those will all need to be updated once the city has kind of more detailed plans for where the roads will actually be and what the improvements will be and what the cross sections will look like and what the infrastructure needs will be. And then again, taking another look at the funding tools to figure out how it'll all be paid for. And then continued community engagement is going to be really important. There are recommendations to continue updating folks in the area, folks that have been on the interested parties email lists, providing periodic updates about what movements are happening with Sherwood West planning. And then of course, if and when the city gets to the refinement plan stage, that'll be another big community effort, a public planning effort to do that work. And then the last piece is the Metro Title 11 compliance. So these are the Metro's requirements for cities that are planning future growth areas that needs to include and sort of address a list of items as part of its concept plan before Metro can consider, making the ask in partnership with the city to expand their urban growth boundary into that area. So we will be working on the findings for compliance with Title 11. I mean, we think that all of the elements are there in the plan, and we just kind of need to spell that out.
Summarize all of them.
Summarize it all. And those, we don't have those findings yet, but we will be kind of attaching those as an appendix item once we have those and once the plan is hopefully approved by City Council. And then here is our future development, sort of potential timeline that sort of, you can't really see all this on your screen, but just kind of emphasizes that there are still multiple steps before any development will happen in Sherwood West. So we're here still at this far left stage of the concept plan, and there's the UGB decision, there's sort of the Metro decision and the local Sherwood decision. There's the refinement planning process and that adoption process. There's the annexation process, land use applications, permitting, construction of public improvements, and then finally actual, what did you call it? Bulldozers on the ground. And that goes, yeah. So that, the expectation is nothing will reach that point until at least 5 or 6 years after the urban growth boundary is expanded, sort of at the earliest, because all these steps need to happen before that. All right. Let me pause there again and see if there are any questions about any of these other implementation steps or recommendations.
So just going to leave questions open for the CAC members, and I'll be happy to have that conversation with you after the meeting.
Could I just provide some more like current information kind of around zoning and planning? Because I think part of the conversation we're going to have is around these zoning types tonight. So there's a lot of legislation going on in Salem right now that has a lot of momentum. There's HB 3414, which would give developers the ability to ask for a variance on our code, and we would be required to grant it. Required, with a few exceptions. And we're with the League of Oregon Cities and everything, we're obviously fighting that and working with the governor's office on that. There's also, on the other side, there's a bill that would give cities and property owners the opportunity to annex land that's in urban reserves without going through Metro or DLCD or so those other processes. We like that because we have control. So as we think about this, we also need to think about the potential changes. 10 years ago, we could draw really bright lines between zoning types, and it's getting harder and harder to do that. HB 2001 is a great example where let me go back. 3414, which that annexation or the variance bill I talked about, that is on any property that allows housing. So that could include commercial land where you allow mixed use. So we have to be really careful when we think about what these zoning types are, what's allowed in them. If you have an overlay, I think, Mark, you were talking about an overlay, if the underlying allows housing, then all of a sudden that whole thing could get rolled out in housing based on some of these bills. So we just have to be really careful about how we think about that. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out. It's not just about what we know today, but we need to be thinking about what's potentially coming down the pipe.
And if I just may add, so I'm a realtor here locally, Portland metro area, and I can tell you now, as far as traffic, we cannot control the traffic. Sherwood is in a central location with buildings going up along Roy Rogers, buildings that are going to be going up all along up Newburgh, all up 99. So what we can only do is try to control the traffic in the more residential areas on roads we have control of. And so when we talk about like there's so much traffic coming through, that's going to continue. We really don't have control, as much control as we like over that. So I know sometimes people get frustrated about traffic, but there's really only so much we can do on those more major thoroughfares.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I will tell you, as your mayor and city council, we are very active in the region with Washington County, with TriMet, with ODOT, and working with them to try to get them to understand that problem and understand that we need to find ways to move people between their jobs and where they live and back. Actually, the other way around. I guess it depends on your perspective. But I don't sleep at my job, just to be clear. But you're absolutely right. As a city, we have very little control over that. But we do, I just want everybody to be sure, we do work hard and lobby in the region, work with ODOT, work with the county, try to get MISTIP funds, which is a way for funding transportation projects. But I'll say it's tough, trying to get all the cats herded in the right direction to get something done can be difficult.
Getting employment in Sherwood, hopefully we get less people having to leave Sherwood.
That's a great point. If you didn't hear that, one of the many reasons we think it would be great to get more employment in Sherwood is so people can live and work here, so they don't have to make those long commutes. So absolutely right.
Okay. This is just the list of appendices, just to kind of point out that there's a lot of sort of technical documentation of the process, summaries of engagement, all of the memos that were kind of summarized in this final report. So if you want to dig into any details, those are all kind of compiled in the appendices. And again, just want to see if anyone has any comments or suggestions. Is there anything that you found surprising in the way the final report came together, or?
I have like 3 or 4 edits on the appendices.
Oh, okay.
Or comments.
Yeah, Erica shared 1 or 2 edits that you had, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, the edit on page 33 that we got handed was not bad. But,
Okay.
Page in remote because of the pandemic, but we changed that. So I think a little update on page 2 that says, after this date, we became an in-person engaged committee.
Yeah. Okay.
In appendices F, page 4, it is the EOA analysis, the economic opportunities analysis. And we just recently updated our building lands inventory, and I don't know if it would be of value to update the source document, with the source document, the economic opportunities, because the building land inventory changed, and where it says in this report, that's attached to this, that there's a surplus of land, our updated analysis shows significant deficits in the land. And I think it's important
Okay.
to note that the employment lands across 5 years and 20 years have deficits.
Okay.
And then, and page 6, there's a section that's highlighted, and the statement that it's making is not clear.
Sorry, which appendix was that?
Appendix N, Nancy, remember?
Oh, the infrastructure one. Okay.
It's a sentence that's highlighted, but then when you read it, it's not.
Oh, I wonder if that was a note that we didn't go back and check for.
Analysis of the estimated construction costs indicates that this option, while expensive, is the least costly financially and to the environment, and least harmful, least something or other.
Okay, we'll have to take a look at that one.
As well as the least impact on commuter traffic. It just wasn't a sentence. And then I just wanted to note we had handled a lot of stuff, and so as a committee member, Appendix N is appendix that we did not see prior to this at all, and so I was hoping that maybe
That's the
people could
housing
look-
memo. Yeah.
That's the updated housing memo that was just written last month, and I mentioned to Erica that my concern was, there's like, page 7 was the one that I really called out, which was that it specifies that the proposal in the plan only had 3,117 housing units, but it's actually a range if we include the middle housing component. So those last 2 paragraphs on page 7 really need to more clearly define that based on middle housing, it's a range between 3,100 and like 5,800, and that the jobs at 4,500, using a range of housing, we also have a range of a ratio of 0.8 to 1.5 house or jobs to housing ratio.
Right.
And I think it would be better to spell it out in the housing memo.
Okay.
And then there was a comment on page 6 that said we were reducing or eliminating off-street parking requirements, or that we had already reduced it or eliminated off-street parking. And I don't believe that if it occurred, it had happened in a limited.
It was very limited. Very limited. It was just for the ADU
Right.
last year.
Which is the
But-
exception to the exception.
Right.
And I think someone reading
We can
in the
clarify that.
Yeah, if you're reading in a document that the city removed the requirement to have off-street parking, that's not what happened. We
Yep.
did not do that. That would be bad. And page 4, it talks about multifamily allocating 10% to multifamily and 5% to middle housing, and I thought, that's kind of where we were through the process, but I would open up to discussion since it's a memo that we didn't get to see as a committee prior to the meeting. Just revisit if everybody was comfortable with 10% of the residential land and 15% of the land, or 5%. Where those numbers came from, how did we come? And that's on page 4 of Appendix M.
Okay.
So, those are my appendices.
Yeah, and apologies for not I mean, that was really meant to be a technical document that was in support of the plan as a document to demonstrate compliance with Title 11, I think, more than anything else. Not really meant for sort of public consumption. But yeah, we need to make sure at least that it's not misrepresenting anything or not inaccurate. Yeah. Jean, did you have anything else? I mean, feel free to also share any minor corrections via email or. Jean read the entire packet. I am kudos.
I made beautiful tabs so I could find it. Well, I mean, but okay, I will ask my next question then.
Okay.
Which is page 70
Of the report.
of the actual report.
Okay.
The top of it talks about village plan. I think I already asked the question
Mm-hmm.
about whether or not it's something we can actually do master planning. As we go through the process, I would assume the commission, the planning commission and city council, when it comes before those two bodies, might ask the same question. So if we could get more solid answers as it goes through the hearing process so that there's certainty with how we're acting. And then I pointed out to the mayor, it's interesting, the annexation agreement, which are binding contracts. When we talk about this area being so many tiny parcels, and then if it comes in piecemeal, the unintended consequences could be that we don't end up with parks and open spaces as intended. And so, seeing if we can add that to the toolbox as we look forward to see how that works in our community. Because I know annexation right now is done piecemeal. And
So that's just kind of supporting the recommendation that's already in the plan?
It is.
Okay.
Just making sure that we understand that it's available and that the city council hears it as we go through the process, that they put it as an actionable item
Mm-hmm.
as we go forward. And I have noted, page 69, hospitality, zoning or overlay, question mark. And I thought it was a good question, just because it's in the plan as options, does that mean that as we go through the next iteration, that it's available as we see how House Bill 2001 and some of these other measures impact our community?
Mm-hmm.
That would be my take. I think the question of zone or overlay is really for when the dust settles in Salem, and we understand that, because if we do an overlay and the underlying zoning, for instance, let's just use today's code, is commercial, which allows mixed use. Some of this new legislation would allow someone to come in and ask for a package of variances. It would basically turn that into housing, right? So we need to make sure we understand that before I wouldn't advise we make a decision here on whether it's an overlay or zoning. That'd be my take.
But to answer his questions, is that we have both in our toolbox right now.
Yes.
We haven't
Yeah.
limited ourselves one way or the other.
Not at all.
So,
Not at all.
and maybe the point is that it's not reflected well on the map, that the hospitality area hasn't been designated a zone or an overlay. I mean, the entire map is a concept, so the other point of like the nature areas are just concept areas until they come in. So I think as many times as we can tell people the map is only a concept and that the lines are really blurry all the way down.
You don't think that point came across in the maps?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was maybe specifically because it's called out that there's like a school, but we don't know where that is, but then everything else is kind of labeled that, it's all on there, so maybe that is a little.
Okay.
I think it's hard because there's, the piecemeal way land comes in. It can be hard to really understand how that's going to play out.
And when you see a map, and we've heard it, I mean, if I see a line on a map, I think it's a line on a map. And even though it says concept plan map, maybe underneath it, we do just reiterate,
What a concept plan map
well, even just in the,
is like.
underneath it, all.
Draft, yeah.
All colors, lines, and designations are conceptual and subject to change.
Right.
Maybe that just
I mean, we did make more of an effort on the transportation network to make that point very clear, but we can make that point more clear for the land uses as well. I think that with the land uses, they are strong recommendations in terms of, we've talked about these and we like these land uses in these locations, but that's not to say that those are final or that they're at all regulatory in any way. Yeah, right.
And I understand that, and those of us that have been on the committee certainly understand that. But
Right.
a citizen pulling up a map on a website goes,
Right.
I'm in a purple area.
Sure.
What does that mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, yes.
Good point.
Points taken.
In fact, I mean, because part of the zoning on there, there was a recommendation that we want to keep all of that as minimal as possible because it's, the recommendations were to keep all of those changes as little as possible because that's a lot of work. But when you're talking about these other things that are coming through in Salem, I just was wondering, and maybe not really related to this, but if there would be intention to change zoning after those things happen in Salem.
How flexibility is that? Exactly.
Right.
Because as things go in 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, this is going to be changing throughout because of the legislation. I mean, 2 years ago when they did legislation, they did how many housing things, and this year, they have a lot. So, I mean, as the progression goes, it might gain some steam as things progress. I don't know, but that's the future.
Are you asking, because this is a concept plan, right? So we have all these ideas and thoughts, and we're setting a framework for, it could be future decision makers that none of us are here, right? I think there is a lot of flexibility. Just in my experience, like we had a kind of a concept plan over off of Murdoch for that whole area, and we had a series of projects come in, and we have our concept plan, and I think there was 4 projects that went through there. But one of the challenges we face is the first one comes in and says, well, we don't want to do the park. And then the second one says, we don't want to do the park. And then the third one says, we don't want to do the park. And then the fourth one, the last one, says, we don't want to do the park. Well, you have to do a park. So it's tough because there's all kinds of ways these things come in. But we do have a lot of flexibility. Zoning is a little harder to change down the road, but we can. I don't know, Gene, if you want to.
I think what I was reading in the report is that we didn't want to add that's what you were reading, is we didn't want to create a new zone.
It was less concerned about what we're saying here because I know there's things that we want to further define based on what's already existing. I just was wondering on these other changes that potentially could come through, is there a way to, and would there be something done with existing, like all these other things that we've already, the NDHR, all of that, the high density, all that, it's already in play, but if those things change in Salem, does everything kind of get redone? I guess is my question.
Potentially. I mean, I'll be real candid. Part of the challenge that cities across the state are having with some of the efforts in Salem with like HB 3414 is it's completely bypassing the public process. So if a developer can come in with a package of variances that basically turns cottage clusters into single family detached or whatever, if we were doing that, we would have a comprehensive plan update. We'd go through town hall meetings and public input, and so all the impacted folks can weigh in on that, and then we make a decision. Some of this legislation is taking the public out of that process, unfortunately. So hasn't passed yet. We're working hard, but there is a whole. I'm a big believer in the public process for all this and making sure that we're talking to people. So it's very concerning. But there is a whole HB 2001 for this session, not to be confused with the old one passed. that we're going to have a lot of work to do around that. So there's a lot of stuff coming from Salem that's going to cause a lot of work for staff in the area of land use. And so I don't know, that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but it's kind of what we're facing right now. Yeah. Did I get any of that wrong, or you guys have any other thoughts? I mean, it's hard to say because we don't know what's going to get passed, but you know, some of these bills have some pretty good momentum right now.
I think it speaks to keeping zoning flexible where possible. And I do think that maybe going to creating a whole bunch, like custom zones all for Sherwood West, which some cities have done that when they do a big, concept plan process, and they say this area is going to be special and we have these special zones. And oftentimes it ends up being just sort of more red tape and more sort of layers for developers to have to deal with and for staff to have to deal with, and not really accomplishing much different than what the sort of city's other more, standard zones can do. So I think keeping it lean is a recommendation, and flexible where possible. Yeah, that's all I have to add to that.
I agree, because if you get too many zones and you try and tailor them to a specific situation, the unintended consequences of things you didn't think about as you were trying to create this special circumstance, it could end up worse than if you had just tried to fit everything in a few very flexible zones. Right. And I really thought the idea of annexation with agreements, so that as properties come in, what I've heard from developers is they like to know what they're going to be expected to do, and the goalposts don't change during the process. And so, if we have a plan and they come in and there's an agreement, neither side is changing anything, and so everybody comes in with a comfort of this is what we're doing, and so it's not a bunch of surprises along the way. So I think that to me is the best way we communicate, not only with the developer but with the community as a whole, to say, as part of our public process, like the mayor said, city does it through an open public process. If we're annexing someone in through a public process and there's an agreement out there that everybody knows, everybody reads, and the neighbor next door reads the agreement in a public process, it's not a surprise later on and goes, oh, I didn't know they were going to do that. So I think that it seems prescriptive, but it seems better because it's transparent.
Any other thoughts for now? We did talk about maybe having a 2-week kind of review window if you want to read it a little bit further, provide any additional comments that you find. We offered that to the technical advisory committee. They wanted some more time to review it and provide comments. So within 2 weeks, if you have any additional thoughts, if you could share those with Erica, and we'll make sure we incorporate those into the revised draft. And then, but before that, next week, City has a joint work session with the Planning Commission and City Council, where they will be kind of going over the concept plan. I will not be there. Erica will be taking the helm there. And then the next step after that, after we incorporate anything we hear from those groups into the plan, then we go into public hearings where the Planning Commission will make a recommendation on June 27th. That's a tentative date for the public hearing with the Planning Commission, and then July 18th with the City Council. And at that point, the City Council, if they agree with the plan, they will be approving it via resolution. And then it's done. And then Sherwood West is done. That's just the beginning. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so just 2 comments. First off, thanks everybody for this journey, because I was on the first one of these, years ago, and then things got changed, and then this has been like 2 years, and so I'm kind of amazed on how well this process has gone from everybody involved, and I think it's been nice to see how when citizen comment has been brought up, it's been heard. And so that leads to my second comment is I just hope that, one of the core values of the city of Sherwood is citizen engagement. And I thought that went well here. People didn't always agree, but I think they were heard. And I hope that robust public comment will continue. So going to your point, Mayor Rosen, when the plan is proposed, okay, here's what I hear in the community. Okay, you have this plan and the bulldozers are starting in 2 weeks, and then we're going to end up like Beaverton, okay? And I think, not that there's anything wrong necessarily with Beaverton, but you know what I'm getting at. So I would just encourage the public engagement, and then when we hear things that don't mesh with what's kind of gone on in this room here about this is a concept, this is a forward-thinking document, that we not only as members of this community, but also the CAC engage in discussions that will correct the misinformation. Thank you.
Thanks. Erica, any final words? Okay.
Captured it all.
Yeah, just thank you again so much for all of your contributions and your time and your dedication and all of your, just being here and reading everything and sharing your ideas and thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.